Welcome to She is Resilient, a podcast for women on their healing journeys who are ready to start living their most authentic and empowered lives outside of survival mode. I'm your host, Tatiana, trauma and somatic therapist, as well as a holistic coach, and I'm on a mission to help more women heal their nervous systems. Each week, me and my guests are going to get real and vulnerable about the experiences that led us to becoming the empowered and resilient women we are today. You'll leave this podcast with the skills, knowledge, and inspiration to start creating the life you deserve. Because if another woman can do it, so can you. Welcome to part 2 of Trusting Your Intuition. If you haven't listened to part 1, I invite you to go back and listen to it. It's episode 10, and I share with you one of my earliest experiences with trusting my intuition. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you another experience that ultimately resulted in working with only women in my private practice. So when I started my private practice in 2020, I was working with everyone and anyone who wanted to work with me. I was still specializing in trauma, but I didn't have a preference for working with men or women because in community mental health, which is where I worked for 4 years, I worked with all populations. So as I navigated being a private practice owner for the first 2 years, I started to unfortunately face challenges with men who were reaching out for services. I came across men who were verbally aggressive towards me, made racist comments, and used very inappropriate language. And so I would immediately discharge those clients from my services. But those experiences didn't stop me from continuing to accept men into my practice altogether until one particular experience. So for context, I facilitate all of my intakes over Zoom, and then if me and the client both feel like we're a good fit, then I meet with the client in person for future sessions. So I received an email from a young man who was seeking services, and in hindsight, I should have taken that email as a red flag. I won't share with you what the email said, but I definitely ignored my bodily cues then. So I ended up scheduling an intake with them, but for some reason they said that they were unable to do a Zoom session with their video on, but they were able to do a phone intake. So I figured that was fine and we did a phone session. But I remember leaving the phone intake feeling really on the edge, a little confused, and to be honest, a little scared. But I couldn't put my finger on it. I wasn't sure why I was feeling the way that I was feeling, and my logical brain definitely took over. And once again, I was ignoring my body, and I was ignoring what it was trying to tell me. And I feel like this is so common, right? To feel something and then question why you're feeling it. So because there's no logical reasoning to it, you ignore your feelings instead of trusting that your body senses something that feels unsafe. And to be honest, I think there was a big part of me back then that didn't want to turn away clients. There was this narrative that I had back then that I was a therapist, and my job as a therapist is to help those with mental illness, and it would be unfair to turn away someone who clearly needed my services. Needless to say, I definitely do not align with that narrative anymore. So anyway, I had scheduled an in-person session with this client after that phone intake, and I remember feeling extremely on the edge the day of the session with this big sense of fear, so much that I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I had my pepper spray with me in case I had to use it. And I mean, come on, if this wasn't the biggest cue to not take on this client, I really don't know what is. But for some reason, I continued to ignore my body. And then the moment finally came when I opened the door and let the client come into my office. He had flat affect. He spoke in a very slow manner. I remember trying to take deep belly breaths while I was in session with him to ground myself. I was very on guard, and I remember intentionally trying to speak in a direct and firm way, almost like to show him that I wasn't afraid of him, when clearly deep down I was terrified. He made some provocative comments during the session, but not in a sexual way, but in a way that seemed like he wanted to challenge me. The whole interaction was really chilling. And the entire time I had my hand on my pepper spray. Something that I thought was interesting was that in the middle of the session, my phone started ringing, which, you guys, this never happens. I am very mindful of putting my phone on silent when I'm in sessions with clients, and that day I must have forgotten, probably because I was feeling so anxious. But as I get up to grab my phone on my desk, I realize that I leave my pepper spray on my chair, and it's clear that he notices it's there. And it almost seemed like after that, his demeanor shifted a bit. After the longest 45 minutes of my life, he leaves my office, and I wait until I hear the front door close behind him so that I can leave my office to lock the front door because I was so terrified. Literally, at this point, I'm shaking because of the interaction. And the thing is, similar to the last episode, the experience that I shared in episode 10, nothing happened. It wasn't something that was so clear and concrete that I could explain to you, this is exactly why I was feeling terrified. Nothing like that happened. It was really just this energy in the room, this sense that I was having in my body. So at that time, in that moment, my nervous system was so activated that I didn't realize that when I went to go lock the front door, I had taken my car keys instead of my office keys, and I ended up locking myself out of my office. So anyway, I had to call a friend who had a spare key to come and open the door for me, and that was that. I was safe. Nothing happened. After that week, I ended up going to my therapy session and telling her all about this experience. And she just said to me, you know, you don't have to continue seeing this person, right? And when she said that, I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Why am I continuing to force myself to see a client that I am terrified of seeing? And it was almost like I needed that permission from someone. I needed someone to say, it's okay if you don't take on every single client. And so after that, I ended up getting myself a panic button, and I contacted my landlord and asked him to automatically lock the doors at a certain time for my safety. I'd say for at least a month, I had this deep sense of fear in my gut driving to work every single day. The client never reached back out to me. I never scheduled another session. And honestly, the whole thing just felt so bizarre. And thank goodness that nothing happened. And ever since then, I made the decision to only work with women in my private practice, which, to be honest, is a little unfortunate because both men and women need somatic services. But I've also come to accept that it's not my responsibility to work with everyone. So I guess this experience is less of an example of trusting my intuition, but more of an example of a time where I should have trusted my intuition a little bit more. If I had trusted my bodily cues from the moment that I got that email, I would have A, never responded to the email, and B, certainly never scheduled a session with the client. And what prevented me from trusting my bodily cues was my thinking brain trying to talk me out of what my body was experiencing. So whenever I have doubts, whenever my thinking brain starts to talk me out of my bodily experience, I lean deeper into my sensations. I connect more with my body. And I trust that my nervous system is always trying to protect me and keep me safe through sensations and emotions. And if you tend to try to rationalize your experiences, I want to invite you to do the same. To lean into your bodily sensations instead of trying to figure out the why. Because the truth is, the why isn't as important as the fact that you're experiencing whatever it is that you're experiencing. Like always, thank you for being here and listening to my experience. I hope that you took something out of this episode. I would love for you to share your thoughts with me on Instagram, or maybe share this episode on your social media if it resonated. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you absolutely loved this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on Apple Podcast, or take a screenshot and share this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at tatiana.holistic.coach. The more nervous systems we reach, the more generational cycles we break, and the more we contribute to a kinder and safer world. And if you're looking for somatic healing services, send me a DM and I'd love to chat on how I can support you. I'll see you in the next episode.